Are you getting the spirit in the dark? Are you getting the spirit in the dark? People moving, oh, everybody groove. You just get the spirit in the dark. Baby sister, how do you feel? Tell me, brother, how do you feel?
Great singers connect emotionally with the song they're singing. I think as a singer, if you can tell a story, say something that's coming from inside you, and not just what's scattered across the lyrics there, but get the emotional content of something and connect with whoever's listening on an emotional level, then you can become a great singer.
When you think of soul singers in Australia, you think of Renee Gay or I suppose Marsha Hines. But Tina's as good as them technically, and she can work a room into just as much a lather as Marsha and Renee, but she's a writer as well.
She's one of the real raw singers. From the minute I seen Tina sing, I was like, oh. I sat back and listened and learned. For a start, she has an amazing voice. She's got a gift. I could sit and take lessons from Tina, but I don't think she could teach me how to do what she does. That's her thing.
I don't really know how I do what I do. That's actually why I don't teach. I only know how to do it.
There's no filter, it's straight from the soul.
I was always interested in music from a very early age. I was born in Christchurch, New Zealand, and brought up on the west coast of the South Island in a place called Westport. And then we moved up to a small town called Motueka, which was about 50 k's away from Nelson, near the top of the South Island. My father was part Fijian, and my mother was of Irish and Welsh heritage. I started off dancing. I was a dancer, so I did 6 years in a ballet school, but I wanted to sing as well. I joined the church choir, and then I joined the local community theatre group. I hit my teens and stopped doing all of that and just kind of became rebellious. I followed a bunch of friends of mine who were coming on a working holiday, and I had to convince my father to let me come because I'd just turned 17. And I came over to Australia with $300 in a little suitcase, and I never went back. Something was keeping me here, and I didn't know what. I had this thing in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a singer, but of course I thought that was just a wild, stupid dream, because coming from a small town in New Zealand, those kind of dreams are made fun of. If I stayed in Australia, I could find a way to make that happen. I didn't like the sound of my voice, and I was really self-conscious that I sounded different to everybody else, and I hated that. I loved listening to great backing vocals. So if I was listening to the Rolling Stones, I would listen, I'd listen to the music, but I would listen to the background vocals. If I was listening to Aretha Franklin, I loved her, of course, and I loved the band, but the background vocals, I thought, I want to learn how to do that, because it just had some kind of magical aura about it.
All about you, all about you.
I learned all the backgrounds on all of these records and kind of tuned my ear, but I could already sing harmonies because my father being Fijian, I have a bunch of Fijian cousins, and we'd all get together and my aunt would play the piano and we'd all sing and everyone would just pick a part and everyone had an ear. Taking that into the professional world of being a singer, I really had to hone that, and that took time. So gradually I started auditioning for things. I'd just go for anything and realised what it is that I really love, which was, soul music and funk. I think I felt that I'd made it into some kind of respectable circle was when I started singing background vocals for some more high-profile artists. Around the beginning of 1992, I started working with Wendy Matthews. She had a really successful album, so I joined her band as her backing singer, and then she had a #2 hit single. So that took us up to a whole other level. I think I toured with Wendy for about 2 years, and then Jenny Morris asked me to join her band and do a tour with her, and she was doing a national tour supporting Paul McCartney. When you work with high-profile artists, you're working with part of the machinery in the business that you've always wanted to see and see how it operates and be a part of. So that was a thrill for me. But I have since, and still do, background vocals for Jimmy Barnes occasionally.
Particularly in rock, you know, there's this sort of classic sort of sounding, I guess, from Ray Charles through Joe Cocker, particularly Cocker, who started to get in this sort of white soul rock backing singer section. I learned to sing harmonies because I'd sing along at the radio, and most blokes don't sing as high as me, so I'd sing harmonies above them. With a voice like mine, it's very top-endy, very bright. I need some strength, some bottom end in there to support it. Mahaya's got this strength. Tina's got this warmth, depth in her body. You know, Jade's got this honk, you know, that's really sort of sticks in there and just sort of fits in the glue of it all. Juanita's just sort of like oozes sex, and it's just island tone in there. There's a couple of guys that sing with them too sometimes that really add to it. Gary Pinto, Darren Percival. And when you put those guys in the mix, it gets spectacular.
So if you're part of a section, everything's arranged. I mean, occasionally you put your own ideas in and they might get accepted or not, but in general, somebody's sending you the parts and you're learning the parts. You are very conscious of creating a sound within the section. You're part of a piece of music, so you have to look at yourself as part of the ensemble. You can never look at yourself as somebody who needs to be heard over the top of anyone else.
Just enough for the city I live in. Just enough.
Singers are the same as any musicians. You just bounce off each other and you're all painting the one picture. It's like 5 painters painting a picture. You know, you're up there and you're painting the same canvas and you're just going to try and make it without turning to black.
Give it up, turn loose. Give it up, turn loose.
Our boy is born in a hot town, Mississippi, surrounded by 4 walls that ain't so big. His parents give him love and affection to keep him strong, moving in the right direction, living just enough for the city. Oh Lord.
His father works some day for 14 hours, and you can bet that he hardly makes $1. His mother goes to scrub the floor for money, and you best believe that she hardly makes a penny, living just enough for the city.
Everybody tried to convince me to become a lead singer, and so that took a few years. I mean, that sounds ridiculous. You know, most people just want to sing and they want to be a lead singer, but I was not like that. I wanted to be a background singer. I wanted to be in the background so that I wouldn't be noticed, but of course I was desperate to sing. I guess really underneath it all, yeah, I wanted to be noticed, but didn't really want to admit that to myself. Very complex, complex character. I met Jackie Orsowski at the end of 1993. I joined his band, the Grandmasters, and I was in the middle of a tour at the time, singing background vocals. And I jumped off that tour because I'd had enough and decided to become a full-time member of Jackie's band. And so that's what I did for the next 14 years.
It was amazing as a young person growing up in the late 80s in Sydney with incredible music going on from, you know, Continental Robert and the scene in Balmain. To see the bands in King's Cross was mind-blowing. And these would be larger ensembles. The live music was the dominant entertainment in that night economy. And that was a continuum of artists that had just played all the time, their whole life up until that point. You know, through the 70s, the Mansell Room, around midnight in the Cross, the Bourbon and Beefsteak, the Harbourside Brasserie in the basement. I think we spent all our money and went out every night of the week.
Jackie Ozowski came to Australia from Hungary in the early 70s. He toured with the underground band Sirius. They were huge in Hungary. He was a largely self-taught musician. He was a bass player, a vocalist, composer and arranger, and he was considered an iconic musician both in Australia and in Hungary.
Jackie was tremendously important to the music scene in Sydney in the 1990s. You could see him a few nights a week, every night of the week with a different lineup. And in the mid-90s, I think he was often playing at the Harbourside Brasserie down under the Harbour Bridge. I think they'd go on 11 or 12 on a Saturday night. After that, he'd be playing at around midnight in the Cross, and after that, it'd be Tuesday at the Rose of Australia, and then Tuesday at the Newtown RSL. He was a magnet for everyone to have their meeting every week and talk shop. He was very important socially, culturally and politically in Sydney.
Working with a man like Jackie Ozowski was a huge learning curve. I often say that he was my university. I didn't go to school to learn music. I learned everything on stage and in the rehearsal room.
There was a scene around Jackie. He was a band leader that you always watched because he was so restless. He was always putting new things together, trying new things. I met Tina because she was singing with Jackie. He'd found a new muse, someone who could put the soul on top of the soul on the bottom. It was a wonderful chemistry, and so people thronged to see it wherever it happened.
For the first 6 months of our relationship, we were just friends. He invited me to go to Europe with him and the band, and it was in Europe that my feelings for him started to change. And we came back to Australia and we just fell madly in love with each other, and we had the most fabulous adventure.
Jackie and Tina's sound was almost it was an urban soul. Everything was just smoking. The thing to remember about Jackie was that when he was Hungarian, he had an astounding musicality. It was if, but he never quite knew how his second language would work with music. So he was always looking for natives to tell a story naturally. And when he started working with Tina, he had someone that could sell a song and sound colloquial and conversational and feel a song and act a song. It just clicked, and then that developed. There was this rolling review, basically. It was like Bob Dylan rolling through Europe, but it was Jackie and Tina, and it would set up on Tuesday night at the Rose, or it would set up on Tuesday night at the Newtown RSL, and there were certain things you did if you're a musician in Sydney, and Monday was Paris Green and Tuesday was you went and saw Jackie.
Jack and I lived in Erskineville in Sydney, and we made a living solely from music. Jack was very famous in his homeland of Hungary, and he would travel and tour there every year. I would probably go with him every second year, and once we had our daughter Mia in 2000, she would travel with us.
She'll believe it. Walk out that door. And I sigh, hey, 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 the rain's pouring down, yeah.
Things got a bit tough in the late 90s because poker machines came in from the clubs into the pubs, and publicans, rather than putting on a bit of culture, found it a bit easier to fill a room with these machines.
We had some big problems. Social change in leisure trends, in technologies, digital's coming in, CDs, the internet, broadcast sport is coming in. There's all this competition for the entertainment dollar. And so as those venues became dominated by sport and pokies and those things, we didn't have in New South Wales the type of licences, the supportive regulatory framework to enable music scenes to migrate into other types of venues. So subsequently they pretty much got rubbed out. For New South Wales, the Liquor Act was anti-competitive. We had a planning system that was completely out of control. Venues in the city changed their business model completely through that time. And the city was losing these great artists. There is the regular part of our way of life.
Jackie was so strong and he was such a force that he carried on all the way through that. But everyone else who was not quite as driven and magnetic, stopped playing as much. So it was important we had someone like Jackie who kept the scene going in a way, while it was tough economically.
He was just a big part of the thinking of the movement that we're all part of in advocating for a better deal from the New South Wales government.
One thing I do remember about meeting Jack and Tina was they were pretty scary. They were pretty scary people, just with their not only their reputation, but how heavy they were musically. I think what I mean by heavy is the preparedness to really do or die for your art. And I think that Tina has that, and I think Jack certainly had that.
Cops will come and move him along. His body reeks, 'cause it's been so long since he's had anywhere to call his own. Tricks up his sleeve. He can whistle like a bird and all the children believe that he can fly way on up into the sky. His cup runneth over.
I've sung on many records as a lead singer, as a backing singer. In learning to write, like it was almost like drawing something out of a can with a rusty can opener that you can't open the can. I was incredibly self-conscious about all of that process. In 2004, I released my first solo album. So the first album was more of a urban soul, kind of funky album, which I co-wrote with Jackie Osowski.
They'd been to America and down the south and done strings and recorded with their favourite engineers and favourite musicians, and it sounded like Atlantic Soul, but it was about characters in Erskineville. Old Man Jones, Coffee-Coloured Rose, little half-caste girl who's dug a hole for herself. I think what they managed to do on that record in particular, which I love so much, I put out on the label I had at the time, was they gave us a soul music that had an Australian vernacular.
The second album was a bunch of songs that I was playing live with my trio, with Jonathan Swartz on double bass, Matt McMahon on piano and Hamish Stewart on the drums. And that was a bunch of standards and with a couple of my own songs thrown in. And we recorded that in one day. That became the second album, Work Songs.
Definitely has jazz elements to it, but it's also got folk elements. It's not dissimilar to somebody like an artist like Nina Simone and what she was trying to do. It's somewhat nostalgic in the fact that it's all acoustic instruments. So it was just a standard jazz quartet, with a singer and three instrumentalists playing arrangements of songs.
if you have some kind of success with an album that people want to call jazz, then you get called a jazz singer. And that label sticks, and it's dangerous because I'm not a jazz singer. I just like those songs. I recorded another album of original material, which I co-wrote with Jonathan Swartz, with a couple of songs that I wrote with Jackie, an album called Temporary People. In 2006, Jack was diagnosed with cancer of the lymphatic system. In February 2008, Jack passed away. And so, you know, that album was really about him.
What becomes of people? What becomes of people who meet and fall in love? What happens when lovers find each other? It's all right now.
One of my favourite songs that we wrote together is a song called What Becomes of People. And I think that may have been the very first collaboration. I took that to Tina pretty much fully formed as a song without lyric or melody on guitar. So it made the transfer from guitar to piano.
She's an incredible singer and vocalist, and that is well documented and talked about. What people may not focus on as strongly for whatever reasons is her lyrics, and I think her lyric writing is extraordinary.
The lyrics are amazing. I mean, if you take the poetry out of the context of the music, the fantastic lyrics, you know, like really wonderful poetry.
What becomes of someone?
When she writes a song, I think she finds beautiful ways to make a social comment or just make a comment on a relationship or a way of being without it being kind of directly about that subject.
I think Tina's really clever in how she allows the space for some ambivalence within the lyrics so that people can attach meaning to the song, their own meaning to the song too. But I think it's a very poignant sort of pondering of life song, yeah, and relationships.
Every song on that album has a special meaning for me because lyrically I was writing from a place of grief because I'd lost my partner.
And so you have become like water.
The song Underneath Your Spell is from the album Temporary People, and I wrote that with Jonathan Swartz. And we had a process of writing together where he would come over with his guitar with maybe one section or all of the sections. And so then I would sing a melody, we'd record it, and then he would go away and I would write the lyrics. And then we'd get back together and we'd hone the arrangement together. And then I would finalise the lyrics, and then that's it, we had the song.
And I was beautiful underneath your...
It's all about her and Jackie meeting and falling in love and their relationship and that sense of loss when it's gone. I think Tina is a true artist. She's not really that interested in the kind of trappings around music. Her real interest has always been in the craft and the art, and and I think that was probably something that drew her and Jackie together because they were quite like-minded souls in so many ways.
And I travel alone.
I write about my life. I write about the people in my life, and I write about what I know and what I'm aware of that is going on in the world. That's what I write about. I put that into my music. I put it to music. It's all interconnected. There's no this is my life and this is my music. They're all, it's one thing.
She's an intense girl. She's a very intense girl, very, very serious about what she does. I sort of tend to come out and hit people in the face. Tina pulls you in. Tina can do it in a lower register, in her upper register. She puts things back where she wants them in the beat. And there's something very, very emotional about it, something very sexy about it. You know, when I watch her sing, it's just this weird sense of pain and sex and love, and it's really beautiful.
She becomes the character that she's singing about. She doesn't over-embellish. She makes you feel raw, and she doesn't get passionate until she's already got you. Rooms just go with her the whole way. But the hour will build and build and build. It's just in her blood. She knows how to deliver an hour.
When you're performing a song, you're trying to do a number of things at once, and you're also trying to forget everything so that you can rise above all of those things, and the metaphysical side of things can take over to make something a moving experience. I've thought about this a lot, because if you're a singer, you're cueing the band, you're looking at the set list, you're realising what's not working, so you're dropping songs at the same time, you're dealing with the audience, and you're trying to look like it's all really easy, and you've got to rise above all of that as well, and that comes with experience.
With Tina, it's like an internal event. Her singing and her emotion is quite stark, and it's very strong, and I think that often, you know, if people are going out for a Saturday night out for a few drinks, it can be quite confronting. It's very real and it's very honest. It's not what they want to be confronted by.
I've had, years of pain, actually, in trying to be confident on a stage, because I know that I look contorted and I know that I sound guttural because I'm not a sweet-sounding singer. And sometimes I don't want people to see that side of me. And so I feel like hiding, and I found life on stage very difficult at times, because you have to show sides of yourself that you haven't come to terms with yourself and that you're not really comfortable with. I'm at a place now where I'm comfortable, but it's taken me over 20 years to do that. When I was a younger girl, I was very nervous in the beginning to really open my mouth and sing. And so I went to this teacher. He was actually teaching Deborah Conway at the same time. Anyway, I would go in and get a lesson from this guy, and he was more kind of musical theatre, cabaret. And I was listening to Aretha Franklin and Chaka Khan. And he said to me, you don't sing like that, you're not black, And so, of course, I didn't, I wasn't trying to sing like, obviously I was trying to emulate them, because when you're young, you try to copy who you're listening to at the time. But I stopped going to him because I just felt that I couldn't be myself. So that was probably the last time I ever got a singing lesson. You can't teach someone how to sing. They have to have it in them, and you surround yourself with the right people who bring it out. They draw it out of you. They encourage you to be yourself, which is what Jackie Osowski did for me. He used to say to me over and over again, over the years, "Teen, you just got to be yourself." And how annoying is that when you're young and you go, what the hell does that mean? What does that mean? Just be yourself. There's something profound in that, but you have to realise it yourself.
You can spend a lot of energy trying to avoid being yourself as well. And that means that you make errors, you make mistakes, and all those imperfections, though, are you in the music.
Those mistakes become an asset, because the mistakes, I think, as well as the great things, they form your persona, your character. I think this is how you develop your own sound, by allowing yourself to screw up.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's embarrassing. It's hideously embarrassing because, especially when you're working with musicians of a level that we work with.
Yeah.
People's quirkiness, people's little idiosyncrasies, little flaws are what makes them interesting to me, and it's exactly the same for singers. It's exactly the same for singers. Whether it's a honk in their tone, or the way they trail off a phrase, or the way they hit a certain vowel sound, they're the things that make it, you know, really, really interesting.
If you don't know how to pull your weight, in the end you'll be getting the foul. You got to learn how to help yourself, and if you don't, you can go to hell. See for yourself. Woo. See for yourself. Now, son of a Superman. See for yourself.
As long as your intention and your heart is true about what you're doing, over time you start to develop a confidence and a focus about what you bring to any given music situation.
The singer's job, as a singer, your job is to find what you connect with in a lyric, and then if you can sing that song and make whoever's listening to the song think the song's about them. You connect emotionally, they connect emotionally, and the lyric takes on its own life, and it might not mean the same thing.
You can't overthink things. The minute you overthink things, it becomes contrived. It becomes an exercise. Of course, that's immediately noticeable and you lose the connection that you're trying to create.
She's got a tractor mind.
Music's supposed to take them away from everything, whether they're struggling at home or their bloody families, you know, hungry. While you're in that place together, everything else is gone. The only pain you share is the pain you're sharing together. And the only joy you're sharing is the joy you're sharing together. And they forget about the rest of the world. That's when it's a good gig.
The thing for me is authenticity. That's what, you know, makes the hairs on my arms stand on end. And I think it's very rare that you hear anything that's really authentic.
The marriage of the right song with the right person to sing it, I think, is the biggest bit of chemistry that has to happen. And you can have a great song and someone can destroy it. You can have a terrible song and someone will all of a sudden illuminate it in some way.
You can tell it's a good song, but when certain people do it, it's a great song, you know. And once again, that goes back to that emotional commitment and that emotional content of the song, and also how, as a listener, you connect to a song. It's not just what the performance is. Some people sit back and they like really straight, really perfect, really beautiful, and if they connect to that song on that level, it's a great song for them. It depends on the listener and the performance, and where they match and where they meet.
I was living for many years in the inner west of Sydney, in a suburb called Erskineville, and I was living there with my late partner, Jack. I was very happy there, and we made a life there, and we created a musical community there. I felt like I had to move on. It just wasn't the same for me anymore, and I felt lonely there. And I was watching a lot of the old characters that we'd grown to know and love move away or die, and I just knew that I had to leave. So I sort of had this inkling that I wanted to be near the water, because I had this amazing epiphany while I was near the water once. I was up in Byron Bay and we'd been on the road, and we stopped off at the lighthouse, and I was just standing there looking at the water, and all of a sudden I had this inexplicable feeling that I was part of the water. And I was part of everything. But after that experience, I started to need to be near the water. So I ended up at Pittwater on Scotland Island. You can only get to Scotland Island by water, you can't drive here. And when I came here, I felt this very thick magic here. This is going home for me. It's the closest I can get to going home without actually moving back to a small town in New Zealand. I mean, that may happen in the future, I don't know, but I've never been happier in my life, anywhere. I have a beautiful view from my house. It's peaceful. My house is way up in the trees and it's hard to get to. There's all these little things that, when I first moved here, I was in complete denial about. What do you mean I have to change my own gas? What do you mean I have to fill my own water tanks and I can't have a shower? So you know, it's real. Life is real here. Living here helps me to understand that occasionally I go out and I make music, but I don't do that all the time. I have a child, I have a daughter, she's 15. She keeps me very busy. As a writer, I want to investigate things that I haven't done before. And so when you do that, then there's room to create something else. The latest album I recorded and released in 2013 was a more electronic sounding album. I wanted to go into the studio and experiment with sounds and production. And so Stu Hunter, a good friend of mine, great piano player and beautiful musician and producer, produced that album for me. So that was an album called The Revolution is Eternal.
With The Revolution is Eternal, the whole production style of that came out of some very kind of strange scenarios. To take what was essentially a studio-based live band recording and then turn it into what the album finally became, which was quite a hybrid and a mix and had a lot of sound world components and beats.
I've always wanted to make a modern sounding album, and I was curious. I tried to do that with my first album, but I actually was a long way away from achieving what I was after because I didn't have enough control over it. It's hard to get close to the sound you're after when you're on a time limit and when you have budget restraints. So it's very rare that you get there.
The Revolution is Eternal is a song that we wrote together. We were after a particular kind of vibe, and I think that vibe would be encapsulated by the acoustic fusion that was happening in the early 1970s with those sounds and those harmonic sounds as well.
We pulled it apart, we chopped it up, we rearranged it. It did go through a number of different lives.
The thing that I love about Tina is that she will jump off the cliff happily and go places that other people wouldn't dare to go. So a lot of the songs that we wrote together were pushing the boundaries of what would be acceptable in a pop song, for example.
When you're free-winging things and you experiment, you come across things that you'll never do again. And sometimes if you capture them early in the recording process, you never get them again. It gets all structured and you move away from it. And they're the moments, they're like little gems that just sort of hang in there and that make songs really great.
You know, when you're in a studio environment, you can catch things that go on in the throat that you would never hear live. And they're so unique to every different singer. And some people might want to get rid of that, but for me, they bring this extraordinary character to a voice. Hearing a struggle in a lyric, or even a struggle to technically get a certain line, can bring a connection to the lyric that you may not get through a so-called perfect delivery.
I think too many people over-process recording. I think a recording process these days, people go in there and just do things till it's so sterile that it's all disappeared. Records that were recorded when they were recording on 4-track or 2-track or even mono, they'd set up and they'd make an album in a day. And you get one take of the song, you know? You'd have an orchestra with 2 mics over there, and you didn't have choices. You had to get your performance down, and you were kicked out of the studio by the producer, you know, so you didn't get a chance to go over it until it was perfect. Under the Boardwalk, Benny King and all that sort of stuff, there's some flat notes and some sharp notes, but they kept that one with the little flat bits. It was beautiful.
There's always a thing when you have your own space that you can overcook things. And there does come a point where you start to battle. Often I'll go and listen to a previous mix or a previous version of the song and go, yeah, that was why I was feeling it then and I'm not feeling it now. And I'll go back and start culling all this stuff that has been added to the song that's complicating it, that's taking it away from its essence.
Quite often I've been in with producers who've gone, I want you to sing it again, I want you to sing it again, and in the end I've gone, no, you've got it. I've done 3 takes. If it's not there, it's not worth singing, you know? If I sing a song 4 times, generally I'm starting to think about it. And I can tell the difference, it just sounds like shit to me.
Well, there's a beautiful story on a Nina Simone track. They're recording the Bob Dylan song, I Shall Be Released. And the band starts and she pulls everyone back and she stops the song. And she says to somebody in the band, she says, you're pushing it. You're pushing it. Just relax. It'll go up by itself. You don't put nothing in it unless you feel it. Let's try it again, please. And then, you know, they start again, and then it's exactly the way she wants it. And, you know, when I heard that, which was years ago, I never forgot that. In fact, it's a lesson in life. It's not just a lesson in music. Don't put anything into something unless you feel it. Yeah. But you see, I don't want to charge too much and then don't sell any.
A lot of factors have gone into making it really tough for a musician in this city to survive. When you live in Europe or America, music is generally much more prevalent in the culture. You know, you go in an American city, there'll be more bars that have live music. You can go and hear and experience live music far more often, and you can go and hear the greats play. Many great musicians in this country do go overseas. It's very hard to have a continuous creative output to an audience here.
When you're constantly trying to create work for yourself and get gigs and create work through getting gigs, it's very self-obsessed, you know, you're constantly trying to survive. You don't really make a living as an artist. It's sporadic, you know, you can make a good living for a while and then you have a quiet period. And, you know, depending on your situation will depend how long the quiet period lasts. And then you may have another burst of well-paid work or just average paid work. The life of an artist, it's a life, you know. It's not a lifestyle, it's a way of life. You're living it.
It's harder and harder, especially in Sydney. I think Sydney is very real estate driven. I've had in the last year 2 regular gigs fold because of complaints about sound. I think Sydney, people do not have a disposable income because they're spending it all on bills and rent. It's very hard to get an audience. It's very hard to get people to go out and see music. As you know so well, I mean, if you want to actually survive in Sydney, you have to kind of live out of the centre, and then it gets really tricky. And if you have children, it gets even trickier to go and see music. It's like music has to become precinct based in order for it to be successful. So you have to have the idea of having a local venue.
When things get tough financially and when things get difficult politically and people become afraid of lots of things, what happens is we breed generations of apathetic people who are not willing to take any risks and play things very safely. With the kind of thing that you and I do, every day is a risk because you just never know where your next gig is coming from, and that's your income.
These days, I think people use music differently. You know, you might have a guy 25 years old buy a 3-day pass for the Byron Bay Festival and get a bunch of friends and some camping gear and a bunch of recreational drugs and do his music fix for the year with 3 festivals over the year. Many years ago, when I was that age, I would go out most nights if I wasn't working and hear bands. If you had some sort of success, then that would translate to the next time you performed. But that doesn't seem to happen at the moment. I'm not exactly sure why.
When we first started, I remember we'd play one night in Sydney, one night in Newcastle, one night in Wollongong, one night in Blacktown. We'd find every gig, so we'd play for $100 a gig. You know, we'd lose money to play, but we wanted to play every night. We'd get free booze and we'd pick up chicks, you know, we'd get to sing. We had a great time. That's all we wanted to do, get in the back of the station wagon, drive to the next one, do the same thing again. And I don't think that much has changed. I think that's what people do, and it's still available for them to do it. I just think that they have to, you have to really be committed. You have to have a lot of drive.
There's no money to tour. It's expensive. It's a bottomless pit. Sure, there are still people touring. Either they're young enough to do it on the smell of an oily rag and they have no kind of responsibilities, or they have industry backing, i.e. record label or management, and they're getting substantial airplay. If the main radio stations around Australia don't play your music, then there's really no point you touring unless you've been invited to play somewhere where there's a ready-made audience. And so unless I'm being invited to play at a festival or at a club and there's a budget, I don't tour. It's changed so much. I mean, I remember my late partner, Jackie Orzowski, talking about this because he toured constantly in the 70s and 80s. When he came to Australia, he was Marsha Hines' musical director and at the peak of her success. And they toured constantly. And I mean, she had a major record label behind her, but things were different back then.
The same old problems exist. People say the opportunities aren't there anymore. I feel like I've been around long enough to know that the opportunities weren't there for very many people always. There's always been a cream of people who, for one reason or another, get success like on a commercial level or have people back them and bring them up. And then there's always been an enormous amount of musicians just struggling to get by, but doing it because it matters, you know, to them, that it's something they really want to do. People are saying you can't get on radio anymore. You couldn't get on radio back then. You had to have that muscle behind you to get on the radio, and the rest of us just made music.
Since pirating and downloading and stuff, record companies have really been on the back pedal, and mainly because they were such greedy bastards for so long. You know, they sat there and robbed artists blind for years and robbed the punters blind for years and just didn't see the whole internet coming. Now they're paying the price for it. Nowadays, record companies are really glorified promotions companies.
The people making the real money were all behind the scenes, and they were essentially music bureaucrats. And a lot of that power base has gone through this shifting into the internet and taking away that stranglehold they had on the music industry.
I think a lot of artists find it hard to come to terms with the fact that not everybody likes what they do. But that's a given, isn't it? Because your music is a reflection of you and how you see the world and how you perceive the world.
It's gotten cheaper with digital media to be able to record and produce an album, that's no doubt about that. But it's also very difficult to make a buck selling your own music. Even the big guns are struggling to make a buck out of selling albums.
We started off with go on tour to make money and survive. Then we started going on tour to promote records. Now you make records so you can go on tour and have fun and survive again. So for me, that whole music scene has done a big circle where the live performance is everything, and really that's what it should be about. That's where you bare your soul, and that's where you connect with your audience.
I think CDs don't sell anymore. There are people who just like to write a song and they can now release just a single and just keep releasing singles one by one. That's a great way to do music now. There are people who like to make a body of work that they put forward as a kind of packaged statement. And I think there are some people who like to listen to albums and there are some people who only like to listen to singles. And all those options are there. You can still put out an album. You don't need to print a CD.
So here I am deciding I'm not going to make another album. I just want to make a couple of songs. At first I wanted to make something that was more orchestral and large, like a piece of music. And I've always wanted to do that. I always wanted to make a piece of music that has a journey and has no time limit. So I was outside collecting some firewood and I happened to have my phone with me. And the rhythm of my walking and the rhythm of me picking up wood and putting it into the basket that I had triggered an idea. So I sang that into my phone. I sent them through to Stu, so he came up with a little groove. The idea I thought would be a verse, he thought it was a chorus. And the idea I thought would be a chorus, he thought was a verse. So this was the first time I'd actually ever used my voice in that way. So layering sounds and using my voice as a percussive instrument on the track. It was really just trying to put down some ideas and we just liked it, so we kept it in the track.
He's hiding inside, he won't be coming back.
I think we're in a massive period of change. All the old models have been blown out of the water, but also incredible opportunities are there, but no one knows what the model is or the way to do it, and maybe now there are hundreds of models.
It was kind of weird because when I moved here I was really starved for just being able to go out and listen to music. And so I've started this live music venue at Church Point called the Co-op Club, and I was invited to do that from a dear friend of mine who lives on the island. He built it out of an old boat shed. I painted it, I went out and bought some red velvet and put it on the roof. We went to the auctions and bought some old furniture and a chandelier. So we have music every Sunday where people on the northern beaches of Sydney can come and listen to something that you can't find anywhere else in the northern beaches. And so that's been an amazing experience for me, being somebody who's booking the music as opposed to somebody who wants to be booked for a gig. I've learned a lot. An enormous shift has occurred for me since moving here to the island. I just don't want the same things I used to want. I'm not interested in fame. I'm not interested in celebrity. I know what that's like. I work with very high-profile people, and I've enjoyed the trappings of that through working with them. And I always wanted that for myself. I will admit that. I did want that. But I don't want that anymore. I just want to make good music.
So many people focus on, I want to be successful. Success for me is about making great music. The important thing is if you do that and you're enjoying what you're doing, you're not losing it. If you love singing, you just got to keep singing and do it. If they don't get it, they don't get it. And if they do get it, it's a bonus, And that's what it's all about now. You just sing. Just sing, just play music because you want to play music. I remember I was asked when my kids started getting in the music business, oh, you're worried about the kids getting in this cutthroat music business, everybody's ripping it. There's a lot of sharks out there. If my kids, if their job in life is to go out and make people feel good, make people feel themselves, what a job. I'm so glad that my kids are doing that, It's the best job in the world.
I want to make a living out of my work. That's what I'd like to achieve. Having said that, I would like to create something valuable that people could be moved by.